I really feel that I want to do something a little bit unusual, because I was searching for the right message to bring to you, and suddenly I came across something which I've never seen before, and so I want to deal with it. And I'm reading to you from Deuteronomy chapter 3, and it's dealing with Israel before they crossed over the Jordan. And this is Moses. Of course, Moses wasn't to enter. Listen. Moses says in verse 18, I commanded you at that time, the Lord your God has given you this land to take possession of it. But all your able-bodied men armed for battle must cross over ahead of your brother Israelites. However, your wives, your children, your livestock, and he says, I know you have much livestock, may stay in the towns I've given you until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you, and they too have taken over the land that the Lord your God is giving them across the Jordan. After that, each of you may go back to the possession I've given you. You know, it's quite interesting, because so many times we feel that Israel is a picture of the church. And there is very much a sense that we are losing sight of actually our goal, which is the kingdom of God in eternity. After all, as we know, this is becoming increasingly part of my ministry, because what I'm conscious of is the more I read the New Testament and what Jesus said and did, the more I'm convinced he spoke more about the coming kingdom than he did about salvation. That's very interesting, because in that sense, salvation is the preparation for the kingdom. Anyway, let me go on, because here Moses is giving command, but he then says something quite unusual. He says, at that time I commanded Joshua, you have seen with your eyes, with your own eyes, he says, all that I, the Lord your God, have done to these two kings. That's on the far side of Jordan. Well, on the side they were at in Jordan. The Lord will do the same to all the kingdoms over there where you are going. Now, suddenly the Lord began to speak to me in one sense, that God has gone before us. And what we have to realize in our spiritual life is that all that God has done in the past is only the witness and the testimony of what he will do in the future. And it's quite clear God is saying to the Israelites and saying to Joshua as the leader, look, you have witnessed and experienced with your own eyes what I've done to those kings on this side of the Jordan. When you cross over and go into battle in faith, I will do the same to the kings on the far side. What a challenge to us, because so many times for me, when I've been in difficulty, I've been reminded of what God has done in the past. For example, one of the biggest things which became a challenge to me when I was in the prison in 1972, it was only 8 years, 1964, when God had so remarkably healed my throat cancer, so remarkable that the doctors could see the scar where God had operated. So when I was in the prison, I'm saying, Lord, if you could work a miracle which is so tremendous, I mean, I don't think people fully understand the power of that miracle. The fact that the doctor said your cancer didn't disappear, somebody cut it out with a knife and we can see where they've operated. That is a very, very unusual miracle. And I don't think people fully understand the prophetic significance of what God did. In fact, it's a reminder to me of Jacob when he wrestled with the Lord at Peniel and God touched his thigh. And from there on, he carried for the rest of his life the mark of God. Anyway, so what God is saying here through Moses is, God is saying, what I've done in the past, I will do it again in the future. But then he goes on, and it's quite interesting how he puts it. At that time I pleaded with the Lord, this is Moses, O sovereign Lord, you've begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds and mighty works that you do? And then he says, let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country and Lebanon. And then Moses, but because of you, that's Israel, the Lord was angry with me and would not listen to me. That's enough, the Lord said. Don't speak to me any more about this matter. Go up into the top of Pisgah and I'll let you see it, but you don't cross it. And you know, what came to me so strongly in this is that we need to have a clear vision in front of us. Something tangible. And to me, I think this has been something that's been with me all my life, that I'm working towards a goal which is something I'm seeing. It's not that I'm fighting and I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing from day to day. Because I look back and I see what God has done in the past, it gives me an absolute confidence that God is going to continue to do that, even across the Jordan. And strangely enough, when I was thinking this over, suddenly the Lord began to reveal something else to me. You know, I never regard myself as a prophet, but I suppose, in one sense, I'm more of a prophet than I would admit, or that you realize. Because I'm not going to prophesy over people and tell them what their future life is going to be, nor am I going to talk in vague prophetic terms. What God reveals to me actually happens. I mean, one simple illustration is how 20 years ago we produced the film The Rape of Europe, which is so prophetic. And in fact, even when they were showing it on Revelation TV, they said, how did David know 20 years ago what's actually happening now with Brexit? So what I'm trying to say is that what God reveals to me actually happens, and I have to be part of the fulfillment of it. But also because what God has said to Moses, no, you cannot cross the land, but I will let you see it with your eyes. So before crossing Jordan, Moses was the only one who, other than Joshua and the other spies with him, and there were only 2 faithful ones out of the 12. But other than Joshua and Caleb and the others, Moses, who didn't cross the Jordan, was the only other one given the ability to see it. And to me, I think this is another explanation or translation of the word prophet. It's a seer, somebody who sees. And you know, I'm reminded that 3 or 4 times I have seen something, because I suppose one of the first times was when I was in the prison in 1972. And I had just gone through the trial. I'd been there 4 months when I was taken before the court, and I had gone through the trial, and I knew I was being sentenced to something that would be up to 10 years in the prison with no remission. And when I went back into my cell 3 days later, I had a dream. And in that dream, I saw myself out of the prison, back in London, in the Royal Albert Hall, speaking to thousands of people. Well, of course, I dismissed it. How could this be? But the vision was so clear and so specific. I knew the date because the Elim churches at that time, every Easter Monday, used to have the convention in the Royal Albert Hall. So I could see prophetically the date that I would be out of the prison, and not only out, but specifically speaking in the Royal Albert Hall. It was more than 6 months after, nearly 8 months after, when that dream was fulfilled literally by the fact that Wilson had come to the prison to release me. I'd flown home with the Prime Minister, and the churches had called me and said, David, we've seen on television your miraculous release from prison. Will you come and speak on Easter Monday in the Royal Albert Hall? So what was a dream had become a literal reality. Now that's quite amazing.